Shedeur Sanders gets good Arch Manning news as Brown's future looms. If Arch Manning comes out after his first season as a full-time starter at Texas after this year, it's likely that he'll be the first overall pick. For the Cleveland Browns, a team that's been searching for a quarterback for the better part of much of the past few decades, Manning becomes the most intriguing option for them if he's available. However, some continue to question whether it's possible, and according to Manning's grandfather, Archie Manning, he doesn't expect him to enter the draft after this season. Arch isn't going to do that. He'll be at Texas, he told Texas Monthly. For someone like Shedeur Sanders, who could have an opportunity to be the Browns' starting quarterback in the future if everything goes as well as it could, this is obviously good news. The last thing he wants is another young quarterback to come in and compete with him, as Colin Cowherd suggested a few weeks ago, that Jimmy Haslam, the Browns' owner, already liked him. Haslam responded to those comments, saying that he doesn't know Manning too well, trying to quiet the speculation. You're in the business and you get paid by how many hits you get, okay? And I think if you know the Manning family, I would bet that. And I don't know Arch at all, okay? I bet he stays in college 2 years, so I don't even think that's worth discussing, he said, per the team. Haslam later stated that he wants to see his 2 rookie quarterbacks play at some point, adding that he and the coaching staff understand that if they want to be the team they're looking to be in the future, it'll require them to be better on that front. Absolutely. Absolutely, he said. But I mean, Kevin Stefanski is aware of that. He knows how important quarterback is, and he and Andrew talk about those kinds of things all the time. It's a daily ongoing conversation. A positive update for Sanders. In some sense, there have been a few positive signs about Sanders' future with the Cleveland Browns. Even if it's due to injuries, giving him the first start of the preseason is a big deal. However, he also has some similarities to the Manning family. Because of his father, Deion Sanders, arguably one of the greatest players in NFL history, he had plenty to consider, too. With NIL money being as impactful as it is now, it's easier for players like Sanders to stay in college, similar to Manning. Uncle Eli, a star quarterback at Ole Miss, also chose to stay in school for his senior year when he could have easily left for the NFL. He, too, was the #1 draft pick, SC Gwynn wrote. Both Mannings have acknowledged that their family's financial stability made it possible for them to stay in school and that many other players are not so fortunate. Manning's loyalty to Texas. However, Manning has also shown a ton of loyalty, which should interest the Cleveland Browns. According to the article, he's the only 5-star quarterback recruit of his high school class who hasn't entered the transfer portal, and he had every reason to considering he wasn't playing for Texas before this season. Just how extraordinary Arch's behavior was, in this day of deep-pocketed booster collectives and fleeting loyalties, was evident in the behavior of his peers. By the spring of 2025, he was the only one of the 5-star-rated quarterbacks in his recruiting class who had not entered the transfer portal. One of them had already changed schools twice. Arch stayed put even though he had to wait 2 years to become the starter. The August air in Cleveland was thick with anticipation. Training camp had settled into its rhythm. The preseason opener was behind him, and Shedeur Sanders was in the middle of film study when his phone buzzed with a notification that made him pause mid-playback. Arch Manning cleared to start. It wasn't about the Browns. It wasn't even about his conference. But for Shedeur, the news carried weight. Not because of rivalry, but because of the strange, unspoken bond between quarterbacks who've lived their lives under famous shadows. Arch Manning, the nephew of Peyton and Eli, grandson of Archie, had been dealing with injury concerns and depth chart politics all summer. Now the news was official. He'd be getting his chance to start at Texas in the upcoming season. For Shedeur, it felt like watching someone else pass through the same emotional minefield he'd been navigating. Shared DNA of pressure. Sanders leaned back in his chair, remote in hand, eyes on the paused frame of a Panthers blitz package from last week. He thought about the similarities. Arch grew up with a last name that belonged on NFL Mount Rushmore. Shedeur grew up with a last name that didn't just belong to football. It was football, culture, swagger, and a media magnet rolled into one. For both of them, it was never just about playing quarterback. It was about proving they were more than a family legacy. Every throw, every audible, every mistake wasn't judged solely on merit. It was measured against a ghost. "I know that feeling," Shedeur muttered, scrolling through the article on his phone. Good for him. The Browns' present and future. The Browns' quarterback room was still a swirl of uncertainty. Kenny Pickett had the veteran edge. Joe Flacco brought championship experience, and Dylan Gabriel was the wild-card rookie. Yet, in his preseason debut, Shedeur had lit up the field with a calm and precision that Cleveland hadn't seen from a first-year quarterback in a long time. His performance had sparked debates on sports talk shows. Was he a starter in the making? A one-game wonder? The Browns' future was unsettled, but the door was cracked open, and Shedeur could see daylight. The Manning news only fueled his focus. If Arch could step onto his stage and block out the noise, so could Shedeur. A call from the coach. Later that evening, Shedeur was in the Browns' indoor practice facility, working on footwork drills when his phone rang again. It was Deion Sanders. "You see the news about Arch?" Coach Prime asked, his voice as smooth as ever. "Yeah," Shedeur said, catching his breath between cone drills. "Good for him," Deion replied. "You two are in the same fight. People think they know you before they see you. They want the name, but not the man behind it. That's why you gotta keep showing him. Every week. Every throw." Shedeur nodded silently. His dad didn't need to spell it out. Football wasn't just skill, it was story. And the best way to write it was with wins. Parallels in the spotlight. The media frenzy around Arch's promotion was almost identical to what Shedeur had faced weeks earlier. Every sports outlet ran headlines mixing promise with skepticism. Every fan forum split between believers and doubters. Every analyst searching for a "but" after the compliment. That night, Shedeur found himself rewatching highlights. Not just his own, but Arch's high school tape, old college scrimmages, even the few preseason snaps Arch had played before his injury. The mechanics were different, the styles distinct, but the fire was the same. It reminded him of a truth he'd learned early. Quarterbacks under the microscope either fold, or they use the heat to sharpen the steel. Locker room banter. The next day at Browns practice, wide receiver Amari Cooper noticed the article on Shedeur's locker screen. "Checking in on the Manning kid, huh?" Cooper teased. Shedeur smirked. "Just seeing how another golden boy is doing."